Fortunate, but my stream dropped. I'm not sure if I have like a stream limit, but I thought it was like 6 hours or something like that. But we are back, and I'm sorry that the stream dropped, but it did. I hope you got a lot out of Robin being here. For me, that was a really big deal to have him here. His book, The Code of Trust, is absolutely a must read on my bookshelf. So I strongly recommend everybody pick up a copy of that. I've got Jeff Harry coming up at 11:30. We're going to be talking about psychological safety and creating safe travels. So let me actually just give him the new link so that he's able to actually show up because our stream dropped. But these things happen, the show must go on. But in between Jeff Harry coming on and now, I want to talk to you a little bit about sitting on the same side of the table. I did promise that I was going to share it with you. So now is the time where we're going to talk about it. So sitting on the same side of the table is a framework that I came up with as I was writing this book. And I'm really excited to share it with you. It's as I said, I think it's probably the most important framework in the book. So I'm going to share with you, it's a 6-step process. I've got it right here in my book. And I want to kind of walk you through the different pieces of it. So it's on page 47 if you have picked up a copy of the book. But sitting on the same side of the table, it's what I think is actually the most important framework in the entire book. And here's why. Is that in any conversation, what you're looking to do inside of every single conversation that you have as a leader is that you are looking to do basically 3 things. And they're probably not going to surprise you. The first is to exhibit that you care. The second is going to be to build and deepen your sense of trust with the other person. And then the third is to identify and establish what the goal is and provide safety on the way to get there. So sitting on the same side of the table is a conversation framework that you utilize to be able to do all 3 of those things in a single conversation. The sitting on the same side of the table is a metaphor. It's not literal. I'm not asking you to get up and literally go and sit next to someone. That may make them very uncomfortable. So please be cautious with that. In some cases, it'll work, but in other cases, it's probably not going to be well received. So instead, I want you to think of it more as a metaphor. This is a way of thinking about a way of having a conversation. When you are sitting across the table from someone, you are looking directly at them. You are speaking at them, basically. They are speaking at you, and your 2 sets of ideas are basically meeting in the middle. They're clashing. Whereas when you're both sitting on the same side of the table, you're looking in the same direction. You are close enough to be able to share. You are within close enough distance to hug, let's say. Basically what you're doing is you're sitting on the same side as friends, looking in the same direction. There is a closeness there, there's a care there, there's a trust there, and there's safety there by sitting next to one another. So there's a 6-step process to sit on the same side of the table. I've got about 12 minutes to share it with you before Jeff Harry gets here, and we talk about safe travels. So here are the 6 steps. The first step is called set the table. Setting the table is the first step in any conversation. And what I mean by that is establishing the goals of the conversation and the context of the conversation. So this is a thing that you do, especially if you have to have a difficult conversation. Setting the table is going to be the most important thing that you possibly do. So what I mean by that is you're going to say, as an example, hey, Jody, I was hoping to have a conversation with you today. Because I want to talk about this report that hadn't come through, and I want to look and make sure that we understand, how I can best support you and how the team can best support you so that we don't run into these situations in the future. Throughout this conversation, I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to reprimand you. This is not a disciplinary conversation. It's not a punishment. The goal here is really to gather information so that I can best support you. So if at any point you feel defensive, it's totally natural, it's totally understandable if you do feel that way, but I want you to know that there's nothing to feel defensive about. I'm on your side, I'm on your team, and I want to talk about how we can make this happen. Is it okay if we have that conversation now? So what I've done there is I've established the goal of the conversation, what I'm trying to get out of it. I've established the context, maybe address some of the emotions that might be coming up for the other person throughout it. By labeling that emotion, I give them some emotional distance from it. So if they feel it coming up, it's already been addressed, they've already thought about it, and they may not react as emotionally. And then the third piece is that I've asked for consent. Any good conversation should be consented to between both parties. If you spring a conversation on someone, that is not a good way to have a productive conversation. So setting the table, the start of that is about making sure you establish the goals for the conversation. You're setting the context for what it's going to be about, what might come up, etc., and then asking for genuine and authentic consent. The very next step in the process which you can't see maybe. Er, It's to listen. Sorry that the lights are making that not able to see. It's listening. So a lot of people in leadership roles think their job is to talk through problems. And literally, that means to talk themselves through the problem rather than actually gathering information and listening. I would suggest that the very first thing you want to do is actually gather information from the other person that you're talking to. Ask them what they think. Ask them what they're experiencing. Ask them what their challenges are. Ask them why they think the assignment hasn't gotten done. Just gather information from them and listen with the intent to understand both their emotional experience to it and then also to gather facts and information. So the second step is to listen. And then the third step, which is intimately related, is to practice curiosity. So that means it's not just enough to listen to what people are saying, but you have to actually ask questions, gather more information to make sure you truly understand. Your purpose of steps 2 and 3 are to completely understand the other person's experience and their thinking about a particular topic. You want to go deep into it and really make sure you understand it. So once you've set the context for the conversation, the next steps are really about gathering information and understanding, engaging your empathy muscle and listening with the intent to understand them. Once you've done that, once you've gone through and they've given you a pretty extensive look at what they're going through, the next step, and you just heard this from Robin, but it's validate instead of judge. That means that the very next thing you want to do, no matter what it is that they've said, is to acknowledge that they hold that view. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it. It doesn't mean that you have to, agree with it and say that it's true. It just means you have to validate that that is a way that someone might feel. It might say, hey, I understand that you're feeling really overwhelmed about this and it feels like you don't have a lot of support. Now, it doesn't matter if that person has an army of support and if that person only works 1 hour a week, that's irrelevant. The point is that that's how they feel. That's how they're saying that they feel. And you're going to validate that, because if you don't validate what they're going through, if you judge it instead, they're going to shut down. They're going to put up their defenses, because think about any time somebody's told you that you're wrong about something. How you feel? How do you want to respond? What's your next move? Probably to fight back against it, because none of us want to be wrong, especially if it's something that we feel. You can't invalidate someone's emotional response to something. An emotional response is real to people. It's real to everyone when you're experiencing it. So the next step is you want to be able to validate what they're going through in a conversation. After that, the next step is going to be align. So alignment is where, after you've gone through the steps that you've gone through already. So if you kind of situate yourself in this conversation, you've set the context for the conversation, you've established what the goals are, and you've gained somebody's consent to have that conversation. Now you move into the conversation and you want to listen to them, hear what they're talking about, ask follow-up questions, get really curious about it. And once you fully feel like you understand it, validate them and acknowledge that you understand it. Then, and only then, are you in a position to say, okay, I think I understand where you're coming from. Let me talk a little bit about where I'm coming from. Let's see if we can find places where our two goals and objectives are overlapping, where we're both trying to go in the same direction. This is the sitting on the same side of the table at work. You're both sitting on the same side of the table. You understand where they're coming from. You want them to understand where you're coming from. And then you want to look in the same direction and look forward to, what are we both trying to accomplish? Maybe they want a promotion and you want to get this project done. Well, how do those two things link together? Speak. And Robin said this again, in the last session, talked about speaking through other people's interests, basically speaking in terms of what the other person wants. And the alignment, your goal as a leader is to understand your people well enough that you can speak to where your goals and their goals overlap. So that's the alignment piece of things. So that's the very next and probably the meat of the conversation once you get into and past the information gathering phase. And then the final piece is what I call closing the loop. Closing the loop is where you establish the takeaways from that conversation. You establish what the next steps are going to be. You establish an understanding of their perspective. You maybe close the loop on how you've been feeling about it and where those two things overlap. And then you ask for their consent for the very next steps. So it's not enough to say, okay, well, out of this conversation, it sounds like you're going to work 60-hour weeks. So good job on that. You have to actually make sure that the person is going to be in alignment with the solutions that have been provided. And if you get to the close the loop stage and they don't agree to the next steps, or you don't agree to the next steps, or whatever it might be, where there's a misalignment there, that means that you have to go back through and go do that process over again, because you haven't arrived at a place where you can close the loop. It's still an open loop at that point because they want something different than you want. So it's really important that at that close the loop stage, you're one, breaking down what all the next steps are going to be. What are we both agreeing to? How am I going to support you? How are you going to take different actions? And how's that going to look? What's that going to look like? When are we going to check in with each other? Be as granular as is necessary for that particular conversation, but get both parties on the same page, and then make sure that you're asking for consent. Make sure you lock it in by making sure that each person is on the same page, that they say, yeah, that's something that I'm willing to agree to. You might even say something like, hey, so of all the solutions that we've proposed out of this meeting, are you okay with everything we propose? Is there anything that you feel isn't fair or isn't a good fit, a good solution for what we're trying to address? And that's where you need to make sure that they are on board and they consent to the conversation, they consent to the solutions. Because if you have consent on the front and the back, you've spent the entirety of the conversation listening, understanding, and validating them, and then finding places where what they want and what you want overlap. You're going to have productive conversations. Sitting on the same side of the table will be one of the things that absolutely changes the trajectory of your career as a manager and as a leader. So I got about 4 minutes until Jeff arrives. In that time, I'm going to just quick hop away from my computer for just a minute. I'm going to have a couple sips of water, and I will be right back. And Jeff, Harry, and I will be talking about psychological safety and safe travels. All right, I'm back. Got a little water. This full day streaming thing is like real serious. I'm halfway through the day. Pretty excited about it. All right, just waiting on Jeff Harry. We're going to be talking about safe travels. As a reminder, if you haven't bought the book, you can go to, there you go, lovableleader.com is one place where you can find all the links. It's on Amazon if you look for the Lovable Leader. It's available now. Check this out. I got a little caption that even says so. See? Pretty neat. Pretty neat indeed. My man, Jeff Harry.
All right.
Rockin'.
What's up?
So good to see you.
I'm doing great, man. Oh man, what are you? 2 hours in? 3 hours in?
It's only 2 hours. It's nothing, baby. I got this.
Nothing. That's not even a marathon.
All day live streaming. Psh, no big deal. It's cool though, because I get to talk to like super rad people, man. It's really nice. And so much love and support for the book. I really appreciate it. All my people coming out.
Congratulations. What does it feel? Man.
It feels real good. It feels real good. I got to tell you, one of the most, so it's surreal as all hell holding your book for the first time. It was like a real thing. But actually the part that really got me, I got a picture of like my wife and my daughter and me all holding the book. But after I got the box and I opened it for the first time, I opened it. The very beginning of the book, I have this dedication. It says, "To my wife, Erica, and my daughter, and to all people who aspire to change the world." And I got all choked up. I was like, oh my God, hold it together, man. Yeah, like almost lost it. It was great though. It was like such a nice feeling to like feel like, oh, I've made a contribution and also, a legacy for the daughter.
Right. There's an "I love you 3000" moment up in there. That's
very much so. Oh, by the way, and I know you'll appreciate this, but I don't buy a lot of stuff from like Instagram or TikTok ads or anything like that. But shortly after Endgame came out, there was this ad for like a little bracelet or a little necklace. There was like a little blue something or other. It looked like an arc reactor. And it has in it like, "To my daughter, I love you 3000." And my daughter was like yay big at this stage where that came out, and I was like, "I'm buying it." Yes. So it's currently sitting on her bookshelf, and one day I will give it to her, and she'll be like, "What does that mean? Why only why only 3000?" And I don't get it.
Like, we're gonna have to watch all 26.
Oh yeah, wow. Absolutely. She'll get it as a reward for making it through the entire phase 1 through 3.
Oh my gosh, that would be awesome. What a gift. What a gift.
I think it's pretty cool. So what's up, man? It's good to see you. Thank you for being here on this.
Absolutely. I'm excited about this. I wanted to have this conversation, so I'm in it. Let's go.
Excellent. Well, I mean, this is a conversation made for you. Like, let's be real. So let's start by talking about safe travels. So here's what I mean by safe travels. We're gonna start there. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah.
Safe travels is the idea that as a leader, your job is to a leader. It's built into the title. You have to lead people somewhere. So there's a destination, there's a goal. So that is why the travels part is there. You are trying to travel to a destination. But the safety part is that it makes no sense to set a big audacious goal if you can't keep everybody on the team from the beginning of the journey to the end of the journey. So you have to create safety so that we as a team can work together and move together towards our destination. Mm-hmm. So that's where I came with the whole safe travels thing. So one, does that resonate with you, sir?
I mean, I love it because right now, most people do not feel safe traveling with their organization. That is the whole point of the Great Resignation or Great Reset or Great Reshuffle or what is it? Robert Rice says the unannounced general strike is people are ultimately just saying, I just don't feel safe at this company anymore, so I'm out.
Yep. So I've also heard it called the Great Attrition, or maybe I made that up.
Great Attrition. Yep.
It's another one.
Called it that, and it's just like it's just this idea that nobody. Well, you didn't know what your relationship with your organization or your company was, and then the pandemic happened, and a lot of companies revealed who they really are.
Yes,
and you were like, "Oh, I'm replaceable." Oh, I don't get paid that much. Oh, I can actually do this job from my home. And then you're just like, what are all these things that they've prevented me from doing? And why am I getting paid so little for such a crappy job?
Yeah. Oh, and they also don't care about my safety or health because I'm a
Yes,
frontline
exactly.
worker. I'm not being paid extra. I'm not being this. I'm just
Yeah.
expected to show up. I saw this TikTok the other day. It made me think of you because it was like Stu was talking about how a lot of these companies are complaining, oh, I can't find workers, I can't find workers, I can't find workers. It's like, buddy, it's too late. You could have actually kept the people in the first place, but
Yes.
now after the fact, now you want to pay a living wage, and now but people were onto you, and all of these companies that are trying to do it that way, all the people that are leading in this way, where their people are cogs in a machine, a replaceable thing, those days are numbered because we are making different choices. We are looking for environments where we have the opportunity to thrive, where there is safety.
Yeah.
And your work intersects with mine in this book because so much of what you talk about, even though people see the Lego tie and they see like, the zany characters on TikTok, your work in play is really about creating the psychological safety to do your best work on the way to ambitious goals. So can you talk a little bit about, your work and what you've been trying to bring into the world of work?
Yeah. So, 2,500 hours, right? We're at work 2,000 to 2,500 hours. Why are we not enjoying work? Like that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I won't tell the whole like long story, but I went through my own path of getting the exact job I wanted. I wanted to be a toy designer because I saw Big when I was a kid, and then I was there, at a toy company, and there was like no play, no fun, no joy, you know, and then I leave that. I helped build this Lego inspired STEM organization, but I basically built it all on play. And then while I was doing that, I was running a lot of programs, team building programs, those forced fun programs for tech companies in the Bay Area like Facebook, Google, and Adobe. These are the best companies in the world, right? And they weren't even playing. They weren't even providing a psychologically safe space for people to be themselves, to actually speak up at work. And I realized a lot of it was because managers don't know how to have difficult conversations. They don't know how to communicate. A lot of them were really strong producers, and then they moved up to middle management, but they never learned any leadership training. This is why the lovable leader is so important right now. So you have like organizations that are lacking empathy, compassion, and shared humanity. And that's a majority of my workshops are around that. Where like I even wrote an article recently about playing at work, and I go, don't play at work. I was like, if you haven't built psychological safety, if you don't feel like you can have a hard conversation with your manager, then that manager should not be leading play workshops right now. They're not
Yeah.
there yet, right? Like play is vulnerable. Play is like, play is
What's your definition of play again? You've given that definition of play
yeah,
before, and I love
play
it.
is any joyful act where you forget about time. It has no purpose, it has no result. Um and it's where you're you're fully in the moment, you're fully present, you're fully, in flow. And that's what you want your staff to be, because they're 5 times more productive when they're in flow. But if you haven't built trust with them, and then you're like, hey, let's go to an escape room, they're like, no, dude, like I do not like you to be like now doing this forced fun. So I advocate not doing forced fun, and I advocate about like, how do you navigate a difficult conversation? How do you start to have conversations about what it is that your staff actually loves to do at their job, and build trust around that? Because right now, so many leaders are lacking trust.
Yeah. And another thing that I love about what your work reveals is that, and it's evident in the play style, right? Because
Mhm.
in order to play, we have to be able to be free from judgment. Nobody
Yeah.
plays well when they're being judged, right?
No.
So, if you like, I'll use myself, I love superhero stuff, but if I bring my superhero stuff into my office, into my
Mhm.
cubicle, and I get ripped on and told I'm being unprofessional or this or that,
Yep.
how safe am I going to feel to be
Right.
myself there, to share what I think is my unique genius? Because I'm now being shown that my preference, the thing that I identify with, is unprofessional. It's not welcome in the workplace. And I'm not saying that every workplace has to allow for me to hang my Spider-Man poster in my cubicle, but I think the idea of creating a space where people are free to share what their identity is and what's valuable and what matters to them and their purpose and their values and their interests, I think that is part and parcel of creating an environment that's open for play, but is psychologically safe.
Yes, and think about it. If you aren't allowed to hang your Spider-Man poster or your Incredible Hulk, figure on top,
it's true.
Are you going to share in a meeting? Are you going to share when, like, there's a really bad decision being made and you're like, well, they're not even letting me do something in my own cubicle, so why should I share, right?
Yeah.
Why should I give extra, And I think a lot of leaders need to be asking themselves, even now, did we build trust or did we lose trust during the pandemic?
Yeah.
What did I do or what did the organization do to communicate to the staff? And what was that message that you communicated? Because if it wasn't a good message and you have had a lot of people leave and then you're like, oh, well, they left, but, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. The next group that you bring in is going to leave as well because you haven't solved the problem. You haven't addressed the bigger issues because you've been trying to just hide them, and be like, well, if you just don't talk about it, then there's nothing we have to deal with. And it's just like, this is why your organization is going to struggle.
Yes. Yes. And the other thing that came to mind, you've mentioned force fun a couple times. Let's say you had to do some force fun. Let's try it on. So you got to do force fun. Now you and I are stuck in an escape the room. And it turns out one of the clues has something to do with Professor X or Wolverine or Magneto. And I'm not allowed to hang my stuff in my cubicle. I don't have a psychologically safe place to store it. Now I'm in force fun, and you can't even lean on my strength because I wasn't in a space.
You don't even know it. You don't even know it. Yeah.
You don't even know. And then there's a question about Legos, and everyone's like, anybody know about Legos? And you're like,
nope. You're like, nope. You don't want to do it.
Not during force fun.
You feel burned, right? You feel like insulted. And this is, I do this workshop with my colleague Lauren Yee, where we talk about the BS of office politics and how you have to dismantle office politics. And a lot of office politics is all the unsaid rules, right? All the assumptions that we make and all the stories that we make about each other that then just exhaust you so that you can't even get your work done because you're like, Chad is getting preferential treatment. And I don't know why Chad's getting so much money because he's not doing any work. So it's just like no one can have those conversations. So you can't have transparency. And thus your team is just shot.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I have in the book a section called The 8 Commitments of the Team. And it talks about, who do you want on your team if you're going to go on this journey together? You got to be real careful about who you hire and who you keep on the team. And then not only that, but you have to be really deliberate about what you're all committing to. What do we all agree to? What are the agreements that the team needs to make to one another to ensure that we get their safety, right? So that's the model that I've got here. But I want to toss that to the side for a minute. And I want to talk to you about how you think organizations can create psychologically safe workplaces. What are a couple of the things that you tend to start with, either by assessment or as like early exercises to tiptoe into this?
So one of the first assessments is, I ask leaders, do you know your staff's zone of genius? Do you know what their flow work is? And they're like, well, what are you talking about? What's the work where they forget about time? Like, what's the work that they enjoy doing most? I don't know. I have no idea. Okay, that's a problem. Right there, right? Second, then I ask, do you know their languages of appreciation? Do you know how your staff receives, is it gifts, meaning like potentially bonuses? Is it words of affirmation? And that means like not just giving them praise within the department, but praise outside of the department, just in case they want to transfer in the future, right? Like, are you getting their back? Are you providing acts of service, being like, hey, I know things are going on at home right now. Why don't you take Friday off, right? They're like all these small things that we can do. And when I tell people, like I'm pitching an article right now about playing at work because National Fun Day's on Friday, I believe.
Nothing like National Fun Day.
National Fun Day at work, right?
Don't have it any other day. And this is the one day.
Yeah, just the one day. And one of my main things I'm telling people is like, hey, first off, cancel some meetings. How about that's the fun? The fun is in like giving them some freedom. You can't allow your staff to play if they're in really wasteful meetings talking about stuff that frankly can be in an email, right? So like that's one of the things you could actually do. Another thing you could actually do is, have one-on-one meetings where you listen to what they have to say instead of just telling them stuff all the time, right? Like think about when you call your staff. If you're only calling your staff when there are problems, why would they want to pick up? Why would they want to be on these Zoom calls? Like, it's amazing. I was just listening to the conversation before this one where you're talking about even having staff come into your office, right? They're calling you. And, right now I'm doing a podcast analyzing Ted Lasso and leadership and positive psychology with Ted Lasso. Yeah.
I had no idea you were doing that. That is
we haven't launched it yet, but we're launching it soon. But we talked about how Rebecca, who is like the owner of the team, the whole time everyone comes into her office and the power dynamic of them coming to the office. And then at some moment she decides to go out. And it's such a powerful moment because it's like, wow, the leader is coming down to hang out with me, right?
Yeah.
And it's changing the hierarchy and the power structure.
Well, also she came out from behind the desk as a part of it as well. Now she's sitting on the couch and we're having drinks and it's a thing. Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing, is that I would be looking at what actions am I doing as a leader to connect and relate and show staff that your work is just as important as my work.
I love that. And I just read a book that I think you would love. It's called Good Authority. And in the book, Jonathan Raymond talks about the idea that we talk a lot about employee engagement,
Mm-hmm.
and it not so subtly puts all of the onus on there's a problem with you're disengaged. And what we're not asking is, what about manager engagement? What are we doing to engage with them? Like, how are we engaging our employees? And I think that's such a critical way of thinking about it that, I think so often people that sit in the leadership title seat think that, they lean on that hierarchy a little bit too much, or they get lazy. They don't even think that what is the implication of me staying in this position versus getting out from behind my desk, going and sitting in your office or meeting you in a place where you're comfortable and listening to what you want and all of those sorts of things. I think we often forget about that.
Yeah. I mean, how many of your meetings, I would ask a leader or a manager, how many of your meetings are you talking a majority of the time, right? And I would be asking that manager, what energy do you want your staff leaving from that meeting? Do you want them leaving motivated? Do you want them leaving focused and driven? So what are you doing to contribute to that? Because if you're just going through the motions at a meeting, then I would be asking yourself, why are you having those meetings? Like, even have a conversation with your staff. Which meetings can we get rid of right now, right? Which processes, which TPS reports can we get rid of right now that's actually getting in the way of the work you actually want to do and the work that you do best, right? There's so much of that. And it's just simply having those conversations and then staff knowing you actually have their back through your actions, not your words. That's the key part. Like, what are you doing consistently by your actions that communicate that you have their back? If you're not doing that, then they just won't believe you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you brought up a good point earlier that I want to double back on that I thought was an interesting question for leaders, which is, do you know the work that is in your each team member's zone of genius?
Mm-hmm.
I think a complementary question to that I've started encouraging people to ask is, do you know the work that they hate? Not because you want to take it off of their plate or that you are able to take it off their, but at least you know when you're doing it. You're not just dropping something on their plate saying, oh, we'll get it done. Hey, I understand that this is work that you really don't like doing. I know right now it's a lot to add to your plate. What can I do to help support you through this? I know it's not your favorite task, this and that. Like, that's saying, hey, you person, not employee, I appreciate what you like and dislike, and I want to try and make your time here the best that I possibly can as a leader. I want to support you. I want to be in service of you. So I think that's another really good question to be asking.
And imagine if you did this. Imagine if you're like, maybe it was like data entry, right? And you're like, listen, I know you hate to do this, but we have to submit these reports. Let's do it together. I'll split the list with you. I'll do half, you do half. We do it together during this hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, just so we can get it done. I get it. And then we got to figure out a way in which we do it better next time. Perfect example of having their back through actions, not just words.
Yep. And then inviting, how do you think we could solve this? I know you hate it. Like, what are some things that you might think of?
Yeah.
You know, could we get somebody on Fiverr to do this? You think? Do you think if we hired an intern, do you think you could coach them through doing this particular thing? Now you're involving them, you're engaging them. And all of a sudden it's not just like, hey, figure out a way to get engaged, employee. It's like, I'm taking the actions as a leader to engage you and to bring you in through listening.
And what's crazy is like we talk about like EQ, right? The emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. Dude, we learned this in grade school. Like, you know, compassion, empathy, you know, understanding, listening, communication. True. Like this is stuff that we should have known. So I don't know why we're so bad at it. And I think a really huge reason why we're bad at it is like we've never had practice. Like the workshops that I run around difficult conversations, all we're doing is practice. And if you think about like a football team, right? They practice all week for a 3-hour game, right? We don't get to practice at all in the workplace. We just are thrown in there and then we just got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult. And then it's just like, and then finally, when you have a difficult conversation, you put so much effort into, you're like, this conversation has to be perfect. And it's just like, dude, no, you have to be having consistent, challenging conversations on a regular basis, just so you feel uncomfortable in the uncertainty and being like, oh, I'm okay having this hard conversation about the possibility that my staff is going to leave. Like, can you have that conversation? Hey, I was just wondering where your head is at. Are you thinking about leaving? If you are, hey, I get it. I understand. What is it that I can do to keep you, what is it to do that I can persuade you to stay? If you decide to leave, I got your back. I'll write your reference. I've known managers that have done that and their staff have left and then come back to the organization simply because the person had their back.
Yeah, so, 100%. 100%. I agree with that. I was going to say something else about the tools of doing this, but then I lost my train of thought because I was so excited about what you were saying. But it'll come back to me in just a second. I promise it will. Well, I lost the train of thought.
Well, let me talk about a different part, right?
Yeah. Like, if it comes back, I'm going to shout and let you know that it did come back.
Though. So, because I'm a nerd, and I love Endgame, what is it about leadership at the moment when Falcon's like on your left and then everyone shows up? What is it about like that leadership moment when they're all gathering that you think is just like, this is what a team is?
For me, I think, and this is like what drives me towards superhero stuff in general. And the thing that always really gets me about it is when the person that you think is the most strong, the most powerful, the most everything, when the reality comes in like a wave, that they're nothing without their support team, right? Like the moments that get me in superhero movies are always when Mary Jane saves Spider-Man, where Pepper Potts saves Iron Man, where, Captain Rogers Steve Rogers is like blown away by the support of the people on his team that come to his aid, or by Peggy, or like people's belief in him or whatever. We have this idea of like the leader as being like the person who's got it all together, but I don't think that's actually the case. And I think what we see more often than not in those stories is that a lot of those heroes don't always feel safe to not have it all together. But the moment where the team has their back is the moment where we see their true strength. And it's actually the thing that I didn't get about Black Panther for 2 years. For 2 years, I didn't like Black Panther as a movie that much because it didn't feed that standard narrative that I had gotten of like, oh, the hero overcomes odds, solely responsible for whatever. But it was like, no, this is an entire community that is rallying around someone, and the power isn't in the individual. The power is in the community. And I was like what?
Okay. Wait, right? So then can I nerd out for a second?
Let's nerd out. That's why I brought you on for this.
So then I'm going to go here. I didn't know I was going to go here, but so you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yes.
So Abraham Maslow got that from the Blackfoot Nation. It's a First Nations tribe out in I think Canada. And he kind of stole it and misinterpreted it. because so the Abraham Maslow hierarchy needs is a triangle, physiological needs, and then goes all the way up to self-actualization. The First Nations tribes triangle is not a triangle, it's a teepee. And at the bottom of it is self-actualization. That's the bottom. Your idea of how do you show up, how are you showing up as an individual, and how are you contributing to the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are you showing up as your full self? Right after self-actualization is community actualization. That's the middle. And that means, like, how are we showing up as a community? How are we getting each other's back? When someone goes into like depression in a certain village, instead of people being like, okay, that person should go to the therapist and then just take antidepressants, it's like, no, what can the community do? Oh, let's find out what is going on with this individual. Oh, they're not able to farm right now. Okay, let's fundraise so we can get him a plow that he can do that. Oh, no one's there to watch his kids. Okay, we're going to have the community help and watch, the kids. So again, the community is helping out. We're, as a community, figuring out how do we want to show up? How do we want to contribute? And then the one at the top that I love, is cultural perpetuity. And what that means is breath of life. And what is that? That means, like, by yourself, you're not that important. This is why a lot of people have like mental breakdowns when they're like 40 or 50, because they're like, I did all the things and now why am I not feeling great about myself? And cultural perpetuity is just like, by individual, your life by itself isn't that important. But then also you are the most important link between your ancestors and your descendants. Mm-hmm. So you are the breath of life. You are what you get to take all the historical traumas, all of the successes, all the wins, all the understanding, all the lessons they learned, and you get to breathe that into the next generation. And you can choose what you want to bring and what you don't. Like, maybe you're like, no, I don't want to pass on that historical trauma. So when you see it that way, then you see your life as so much more important, because you're thinking about, how am I how am I connecting my ancestors to my descendants? And then you aren't like having this mental breakdown about individualism. And I think going back to work, I think a lot of times we're constantly thinking of ourselves instead of thinking of the community, and how are we building an organization that feels more like a community, where we feel like we can trust one another. And this is why there's such distrust in the workplace.
I love it. I love it. And actually, as you were talking, I remembered the thing that I wanted to ask you before, but it actually fits in more perfectly here, because you had mentioned, this stuff is all basic. We learned this in grade school, right? Mm-hmm. Like compassion and connection, these things. But like between then and now, we're in the workforce. All of these traumas happen to us. All of these experiences, good, bad, and different. Maybe we were influenced by the media that we were put in front of. Maybe we had trauma at work. Maybe we had an education experience that caused us to see things in a certain way, or protect ourselves, or fear, or become fearful of something. Maybe we had very, very like overbearing parents, or maybe parents that didn't give us enough structure. And we become these people, and we go out into the workforce, these unique individual damaged snowflakes.
Mm-hmm.
Coming together to do work together, and we get put in these team environments. And some people all of us bring in some form of unconscious bias into these situations. And then we need the team to work well to get towards a goal. So in the book, I put together what I believe are like the 8 commitments of the team, things that the teams need to commit to. In your world, and the things that you've done, what are some of the things that you think high performing, successful teams do together? Just a couple things that help to create safety to be able to accomplish those goals.
They're willing to have honest, hard conversations. It starts there. It starts with a manager just being like, hey, we messed up during the pandemic. How are the ways in which you feel we messed up, and how can we be better? Right?
Yeah.
How can you have that conversation? Hey, I know that I said I'll support you as a leader. Do you think, how have I done so far? How's that going on?
Yeah. And be honest about it. Like,
let us be honest about it. Or in the meeting, like creating a space where people can disagree comfortably with each other, right? The transparency. If you know a good team when you walk in, because they're laughing, because they can actually roast with one another. They can actually joke with each other, right? Like, there's a certain rapport that has been built from them not only going through experiences together, but each and every leader putting themselves out there and being in the trenches with them. So that's what I would be telling the leader. Be in the trenches, have those hard conversations individually, then have those conversations as a team. And then when the feedback comes back to you from your staff, actually do something about it. The amount of times that like staff or employees say a problem they have and then it falls into a black hole, right? Like going back to like something as basic as like Ted Lasso, right? One of the first things he asked, he put out like a suggestion box, and it was just like, what is it that people need? What do you want to fix around here? And most people are like, the suggestion box is stupid. But eventually some people threw stuff in and they were like, the showers suck. The water pressure sucks. First thing he took care of. Small action.
Yep.
Totally starts to build trust. Each small trustworthy action. That's what each manager has to be thinking. What am I doing every day to build trust with my staff?
Love it. Love it. Well, Jeff, the last question I'm going to ask you to wrap up on is, when I say lovable leader, who from your past or present comes to mind?
Ooh, that's a good question. A lovable leader. Someone that I know?
Could be anybody from your professional, personal, someone that you look at and they exemplify for you the qualities of care, trust, and safe travels.
I would say someone I've worked with for a really long time, Lauren Yee. Like, and she worked with me at my former job, and now we collaborate from time to time. And what she was able to do, which was really amazing, was she was able to retain employees, part-time employees, for years. And people were like, how are you able to retain these part-time employees for years? And it was because she cared. And what I mean by cared is meaning like they had gatherings outside of work. They had like their first Friday gatherings. They did a bunch of like just fun things on the side that had nothing to do with work. But also she was in the trenches with them on a regular basis. If they had to like teach a class and then they couldn't, she'd cover them. They needed certain materials. She would drive an hour to drop it off to them. Each of her actions, just because she's a caring person, communicated to them, wow, she cares so much about me that I want to care more about this job. And she would even help them like pursue their next career or go back to school or figure out what they want to do next. All of those things that don't benefit her, that don't benefit the organization, but she does them because she cares about the person as a human being. And we need more of that in the world if we want to evolve and get to a future workplace that we actually all enjoy.
I completely agree with you. Jeff, you're the man. I really appreciate you coming on. I love talking with you, and I always got to watch the clock when we're on a thing, because I could talk to you literally all day. You're my dude, man. And I'm so happy for the article you just put out there. I thought it was fantastic. The one with Force Fun and everything. So I think everybody should go and follow you wherever you are and follow the work you're doing. I love it. I love your TikTok. Keep doing what you're doing, man. Thank you for coming on, supporting the Lovable Leader.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Take care.
See you, man. All right, so that concludes the morning portion of the Lovable Leader launch event. I will be back at 1 o'clock after taking a nice little lunch break and to drink some water because I've been talking a lot this morning. I hope you've enjoyed the first part of the day. I hope you come back for the second part of the day. I'll be live streaming from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, bunch more guests, and I will see you there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Love you.